Pushpin disclaimer: this story is a work of fiction created solely for emotional and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual events, locations, or individuals is purely coincidental. The narrative contains elements of suspense, mystery, and drama designed to engage the reader emotionally. It should not be interpreted as factual, nor as a reflection of any real hotel or travel experience. The night started like any other, calm, predictable, and uneventful. I had been driving along the highway, a long stretch of road that connected the city to the countryside. My plan was simple: reach home before midnight, get some rest, and be ready for work in the morning. But life has a strange way of rewriting even the best-laid plans. The sky had been unusually dark that evening, heavy with the promise of rain. At first, it was nothing more than a drizzle tapping softly against my windshield, but soon the drizzle turned into sheets of water that blurred the road ahead. My wipers worked furiously, but visibility dropped so quickly I could barely make out the next turn. And then it happened: my car coughed, sputtered, and died. I pulled over, the hazard lights blinking faintly in the storm. My phone had only 12% battery left, and to my horror, there was no signal. Stranded in the middle of nowhere, with rain hammering down and no way to call for help, panic began to settle in. I stepped out, pulling my jacket tight against the cold wind. The road was empty, not a single car in sight. I scanned the horizon, searching desperately for any sign of shelter, when I noticed a faint light in the distance. It flickered like a small beacon in the storm, half hidden behind tall trees. I had no choice but to head toward it. The walk felt endless. The ground was muddy, my shoes soaked through, and the howling wind made every step heavier. But finally, I reached it, an old hotel, standing alone like a relic from another time. Its sign creaked in the storm: the Silver Pines Inn. The building looked strange, too elegant to be abandoned, yet too neglected to feel safe. Windows glowed faintly with yellow light, but the curtains inside remained drawn. I hesitated, a chill running through me that had nothing to do with the rain. Something about the place didn't feel right. Still, the alternative was worse. With trembling hands, I pushed open the heavy wooden door. A warm rush of air greeted me, carrying the faint smell of old wood and something sweet, almost like faded perfume. Inside, the lobby was dimly lit, with vintage furniture and a reception desk that looked like it belonged in another century. A man appeared behind the counter, dressed neatly in a suit that seemed a little too formal for the setting. His smile was polite, but his eyes lingered on me a moment too long. "Welcome," he said softly. "You look like you've had quite a night. Would you like to stay with us?" I hesitated. Every instinct in me screamed to turn back, but the storm outside left me no choice. With a small nod, I whispered, "Yes, just for the night." And that was the beginning of a story I would never forget. The receptionist's smile lingered as he slid an old-fashioned key across the counter. The tag was brass, engraved with the number 204. Something about the way it gleamed under the dim chandelier felt almost staged, like it had been waiting for me all along. "Second floor, just down the hall," he instructed, his voice unusually calm, almost rehearsed. "Breakfast will be served in the morning at 7 sharp. Please enjoy your stay." His words should have been comforting, but instead they felt scripted, like a line from a play. I tucked the key into my pocket and looked around. The lobby was unlike any modern hotel I had ever seen. Heavy velvet curtains draped across the windows, their deep maroon fabric swallowing the flickering light. The furniture was carved from dark wood, ornate and polished, though chipped in places. A grandfather clock ticked solemnly in the corner, its pendulum swinging with eerie precision. And yet, for all its elegance, the place seemed too quiet. No other guests appeared in sight. No footsteps echoed in the hallways. No muffled conversations came from behind the closed doors. Just silence, thick, unsettling silence broken only by the faint hum of the storm outside. I climbed the staircase, my shoes squeaking faintly against the old carpet runner. The air grew colder as I ascended, carrying with it a faint scent, something like lavender mixed with dust. My hand brushed against the banister, and I noticed it was worn smooth, as though countless hands had once gripped it over the years. The hallway stretched before me, lined with identical doors, each marked with brass numbers. The wallpaper was faded with age, patterned with golden vines that seemed to twist and curl in the flickering light. Some sections of the ceiling sagged slightly, as if tired from holding secrets too long. When I reached room 204, I paused. The door itself looked different from the others, newer, sturdier, as though it had been replaced recently. My fingers tightened around the key. For reasons I couldn't explain, unlocking that door felt like crossing a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. Inside, the room was warm but oddly bare. A single bed stood neatly made with crisp white sheets. A nightstand held a small lamp with a golden shade. There was no television, no phone, no mirror, just the essentials, stripped down to something almost clinical. I set my wet jacket on the chair and sat on the bed, listening. At first, nothing but the soft patter of rain filled the silence. But then, faintly, I thought I heard something else, the sound of footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate. I opened the door and peered out, but the corridor was empty. Only the shadows greeted me. Shaking my head, I returned to the room and locked the door behind me. I told myself it was just my imagination, just exhaustion from the storm and the long night. Yet even as I lay down, unease curled deep inside me. Something about this hotel wasn't right. And I had a sinking feeling the night was only just beginning. The bed creaked faintly under my weight as I shifted, trying to get comfortable. The storm still raged outside, rain lashing against the windows with relentless force. Every so often, lightning illuminated the room in stark white, followed by thunder that shook the walls. It should have been soothing, safe inside, sheltered from the storm, but instead, I felt like I was being watched. I sat up, glancing around the room again. The absence of a mirror unsettled me the most. Hotels always had mirrors on the wall, above the desk somewhere. But here none. The walls were plain, almost too plain, as if something had been removed. My eyes landed on a small discolored rectangle on the wallpaper, just above the dresser. It looked like the outline of a frame that had once hung there. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it had simply fallen, or perhaps the hotel was under renovation. But deep down, unease tightened in my chest. I pulled out my phone to check the time. 11:37 p.m. The battery had dipped to 7%, and there was still no signal. Just that mocking "no service" message in the corner of the screen. Suddenly, I heard it again, the footsteps. Slow, measured, right outside my door. My breath caught in my throat as I leaned closer to listen. The floorboards creaked under the weight of someone heavy, pacing back and forth, stopping right in front of room 204. My heart pounded. I thought about calling out, but something in me froze. I just waited, barely daring to breathe. And then silence. As if whoever it was had never been there at all. I finally forced myself to lie down, pulling the blanket up around me. "It's nothing," I whispered to myself. "Just your nerves." But just as I was about to drift off, a soft tapping echoed against the wall. Not the window, the wall. 3 taps, evenly spaced. I sat bolt upright, staring at the wall beside the bed. It was the side that connected to room 203. Relief washed over me for a moment. Maybe it was just another guest. Maybe they were restless too. But then came the realization, I hadn't seen or heard a single other guest since I arrived. Not in the lobby, not in the hallways. The receptionist never mentioned other occupants. I pressed my ear against the wall. At first, nothing. And then, faintly, whispering. Too soft to make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A hushed voice, urgent, almost pleading. I stumbled back from the wall, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at me to leave the hotel, storm or not. But when I tried the door, the lock jammed. My key turned smoothly in the knob, yet the door refused to budge. Panic clawed at my chest. I rattled the handle harder, but it was no use. Something or someone didn't want me leaving that room tonight. And as the whispers grew louder, I knew sleep was the last thing I'd be getting. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door that refused to open. My chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, each second stretching longer than the last. The whispers through the wall had stopped, replaced again by that suffocating silence. It was worse than the noise. Finally, I decided I couldn't just sit and wait. I picked up the brass key, slipped it into my pocket, and tried once more. To my surprise, the door opened easily this time, as if it had never been stuck at all. Confused but determined, I stepped into the hallway. The corridor was darker than before. Only 2 wall lamps were lit, flickering faintly, leaving long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally. I walked slowly, each step making the floor groan beneath me. Halfway down the hall, I noticed something odd. One of the doors, room 203, was slightly ajar. The same room that shared the wall with mine. A faint light glowed from inside, along with a strange, low-humming sound. Against every ounce of reason, I pushed the door open a little further and peeked inside. The room was empty, or at least it seemed to be. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled as if someone had left in a hurry. On the dresser sat an old radio, playing static mixed with faint music, the kind you'd expect from decades past. The wallpaper peeled in places, revealing dark stains beneath. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold: a suitcase. Not just any suitcase, but one nearly identical to mine, right down to the faded airline tag. Only, it wasn't mine. My bag was locked in my room. The sound of footsteps made me jump. I spun around, heart hammering, but the hallway was empty. The footsteps, however, didn't fade away. They grew louder, closer, until I felt them stopping right behind me. I didn't dare look back. I bolted into the hall, slamming the door to room 203 shut behind me. My pulse thundered in my ears as I ran toward the staircase, desperate to find someone, anyone. At the bottom of the stairs, I finally saw another figure. A woman, dressed in an old-fashioned gown, stood in the lobby near the grandfather clock. Her hair was pinned neatly, her face pale, her eyes distant. Relief flooded me. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice trembling. "I need help. Something's wrong with this place." She turned slowly toward me, her expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might answer. But instead, she smiled faintly, raised a finger to her lips, and whispered, "Shoo." Before I could respond, the grandfather clock behind her chimed midnight. The sound echoed so loudly it rattled the chandeliers, drowning out everything else. And when the chime stopped, the woman was gone. I was alone again, standing in that eerie lobby, my skin crawling with dread. This wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was a trap, and I had just stepped deeper inside it. I stumbled backward, staring at the empty space where the woman had just stood. My mind raced, struggling to make sense of what I had seen. A trick of the light? My imagination, twisted by exhaustion? No, it had felt too real. The way she had whispered, the faint smile, the sound of the clock, it was real. Too real. I forced myself to breathe, to focus. The lobby was empty now, but the air felt heavier, as though the walls themselves had absorbed her presence. The silence pressed in on me, broken only by the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then they dimmed until the entire lobby was swallowed in near darkness. Only the faint glow of the chandelier above remained, casting jagged shadows that danced across the walls. And then came the phone. From behind the reception desk, the old rotary phone began to ring. Loud, shrill, cutting through the silence like a blade. I froze, staring at it, my every nerve screaming not to answer. Yet something compelled me forward. My hand shook as I lifted the receiver. For a moment, only static filled the line. Then, beneath the crackle, a voice emerged. "Don't stay." It was faint, broken, almost drowned in the static. "Leave before sunrise." My blood ran cold. "Who is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. No answer, just the click of the line going dead. The phone slipped from my grasp, clattering onto the desk. My chest heaved as I turned, scanning the room. That's when I noticed the staircase again. At the top, faintly illuminated by the flickering light, stood a figure. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing a dark suit. His face was hidden in shadow, but his posture was stiff, deliberate. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, watching me. I blinked, and he was gone. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs felt heavy, as though the very air clung to me like chains. I forced myself back toward my room, every step an effort against the invisible weight pressing down on me. When I finally reached room 204, I slammed the door shut and locked it. My chest ached from the pounding of my heart. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching the blanket like a shield. But the night wasn't done with me. From the hallway came the sound of doors opening, one after another, down the corridor. Slowly. Deliberately. Hinges groaning as if the entire floor had come alive. Then footsteps, dozens of them, moving in unison, pacing the hallway outside my room. I pressed my ear against the door, my breath ragged. Voices murmured now, low and indistinct, rising and falling like a chant. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew one thing with chilling certainty: those voices weren't alive. And then, just as suddenly as it began, silence. The only sound left was my heartbeat, echoing like a drum in the suffocating darkness. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My eyes remained wide open, fixed on the ceiling, while every muscle in my body stayed tense, waiting for the next sound. The silence was unbearable, almost louder than the storm outside. At some point, I decided I couldn't just lie there. I needed answers. Grabbing the brass key and my nearly dead phone, I crept out of the room again, determined to search the hotel. The hallway was deserted, but something felt different now. The wallpaper that had seemed merely faded before looked darker, as though stained with shadows that shifted when I wasn't looking directly at them. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the floor was amplifying every sound I made. I made my way back to the lobby, careful not to glance at the grandfather clock. The receptionist's desk sat empty this time, but on top of it lay a stack of papers I hadn't noticed before. They were old newspapers, yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I picked one up. The headline froze my blood: "Tragedy at Silver Pines Inn. Guests mysteriously vanish overnight." I skimmed the article, my pulse racing. It was dated 30 years ago. According to the report, multiple travelers had checked into the hotel during a storm, just like me, but by morning, none were ever seen again. Police investigations found no trace of them. The hotel closed shortly after, yet here I was, standing in its lobby. I grabbed another article. Former hotel manager found dead. Suicide note hints at dark secrets. The note, according to the report, was incoherent but mentioned keeping them here forever and the walls know their names. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the paper. Suddenly, a sharp creak echoed above me. I glanced up and nearly screamed. On the balcony overlooking the lobby stood several figures, men, women, even a child, staring down at me. Their faces were pale, hollow, their eyes empty. They didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, the newspaper crumpling in my fist. When I looked again, the balcony was empty. Desperate, I darted into a side hallway, away from the lobby. It led to what appeared to be a small library. Dusty shelves lined the walls, filled with leather-bound books. In the center stood a wooden table with more papers scattered across it, guest logs. I flipped one open, running my finger down the names. My stomach dropped when I reached the last page. There it was. My name, written neatly in fresh ink. The date matched tonight. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even given the receptionist my name. The realization crashed over me like ice water. This hotel wasn't just old, it was cursed. And somehow it had claimed me the moment I stepped through its doors. The lights flickered again. From somewhere behind the shelves came the sound of footsteps. Slow. Steady. Approaching. And this time I knew I wasn't imagining it. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the library until they seemed to vibrate in my chest. I spun around, heart pounding, eyes darting between the shadows. "Who's there?" I demanded, though my voice trembled. From behind one of the tall shelves, the receptionist emerged. His suit looked sharper than before, perfectly pressed, his smile stretched a little too wide. His eyes gleamed with something that wasn't human. "You shouldn't be wandering," he said softly, almost kindly. "The night is not forgiving to those who stray." I backed away, clutching the guest log to my chest. "What is this place? What do you want from me?" He tilted his head, as though amused by my panic. "What we want." He paused, and then his smile widened. We don't want. We keep. Before I could react, the air around us grew colder. Behind him, shadows began to stir. Figures emerged, half solid, half fading, faces pale, expressions empty. They were the people from the newspaper articles, the lost guests. Their eyes locked onto me, and an overwhelming wave of dread washed over me. "You're one of them now," the receptionist whispered. "Your name is written. The house has claimed you." I shook my head violently, gripping the log. "No. I'm leaving. I won't stay here." With a surge of desperate courage, I hurled the heavy book at him. It struck his chest, and for a moment, his form flickered like a distorted image on a broken screen. The figures behind him wailed, their voices rising in a chilling chorus that shook the shelves. I didn't wait. I ran. The hallways twisted as I sprinted through them, each turn leading me deeper into a maze. Doors opened on their own, revealing glimpses of horrors inside, rooms filled with shadows writhing like smoke, beds stained with something dark, mirrors reflecting people who weren't me. I forced myself forward, ignoring every temptation to look closer. At last, I burst into the lobby. The grandfather clock struck once, echoing like a death knell. It was 3 a.m. My chest heaved as I staggered toward the front doors, praying they weren't locked. The receptionist's voice carried through the air, soft but sharp as glass. "You can't leave. You belong to us now." I grabbed the handle and yanked. At first, nothing. Then, with a deafening crack, the doors swung open and the storm roared in. Rain lashed my face, wind whipping around me as I stumbled outside. Behind me, the lobby erupted with sound, the clock chiming, voices screaming, doors slamming. The air was filled with the shrieks of the damned. I didn't dare look back. I ran into the storm, mud splashing beneath my feet, heart racing with a single thought: get away. But even as I fled into the night, a chilling truth settled deep inside me. The hotel hadn't tried to stop me. It had let me go. And somehow, that felt far worse. The storm lashed against me as I stumbled down the deserted road, my soaked clothes clinging to my skin, my lungs burning with every breath. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to keep moving, farther and farther from that cursed place. By some miracle, headlights eventually appeared in the distance. A truck slowed as it approached, and the driver, an older man with kind eyes, rolled down his window. "You all right, kid? You look like hell." I nodded weakly, barely able to form words. "The hotel. Silver Pines Inn. You have to." His brows furrowed. "Silver Pines." He shook his head. "Son, that place burned down 30 years ago. There's nothing out there but ruins." I froze, rain dripping into my eyes. No, I was just there. I stayed the night." My voice broke. The driver gave me a look halfway between pity and concern. "You must have been seeing things. Storm like this can play tricks on the mind. Come on, I'll take you to town." Too exhausted to argue, I climbed into the truck. As we drove, I glanced back through the rain-smeared window. The road stretched into darkness, but in the distance, faintly glowing through the storm, I swore I saw it, the outline of the hotel, standing proud and whole, its windows lit like watchful eyes. When I blinked, it was gone. By the time I reached town, dawn had broken. I stumbled into a diner, trying to explain what I had seen. The waitress, an elderly woman, paused when I mentioned Silver Pines. She set down her coffee pot and leaned closer. "You're not the first," she whispered. "Travelers get caught in storms out there. Some come back babbling about that hotel. Most don't come back at all." Her words chilled me more than the storm ever could. I wanted to deny it, to convince myself it was all a dream brought on by exhaustion and fear. But when I checked my pocket, my fingers brushed against cold brass. The key. Room 204. I dropped it onto the counter, and the waitress gasped softly. "You need to get rid of that," she said, her voice trembling, "before it takes you back." I shoved it deep into my bag, unwilling to touch it again. But even now, as I sit here writing this, I feel its weight like an anchor, pulling me back toward that place. Some nights, when the wind is howling outside my window, I hear faint footsteps in the hallway. Sometimes, I wake to the sound of whispers against my wall, just like in room 204. The silver pines and didn't just let me go. It followed me. And one night, when the storm is right, I know I'll hear the chime of the grandfather clock again. And this time, I may not escape. 13.